when it's properly recorded like this. So cool. So I did send over just a couple of notes of things that we want to cover, but that was only really just to make sure that I don't forget the basics. And really, I just want to have a conversation with you about your community and just get to know you really and the team. And I met Mario before. I came over a few weeks back now, probably back in like April. And, I hung out in Philadelphia for a week or so, met with some customers, met with some prospects, traveled around a little, went out into the Lancaster County, like it's that's not the county, is it? Is it the county? It is the county, right?
I think it's the county and the city.
There you go. Yeah.
Township and just all the things.
That's what confused me. Yeah. And I spent some time with the Amish out there because we've got an Amish customer. So that was really nice. But Mario did say, look, things are happening. There's a lot of things happening for Golf Association of Philly. You've grown this wonderful community, and I just want to get to know that. So can you start by just basically just giving me like the top view really of like what it is, what is the Philadelphia, what is the Golf Association of Philadelphia, what's the volunteer program there for?
Sure. So GAP at large is the Allied Golf Association for our geographic territory under the USGA. So you can kind of think of it like a franchise model a little bit, or if you're familiar with the PGA sections and how like R&A and Golf Australia kind of organize and cover their territories. So we have, checking my notes, 350 member clubs and over 130,000 golfers that are technically members of the association. Largely, that is code for they have a active handicap on the GIN system, which is kind of that equalizing system that lets golfers compete based on ability level. So I don't know how much of a golfer you are or are not. So
we have a local. I'm not much of a golfer. However, there is a you've probably got loads of these in the States, but there's these places that you can go if you have a faint interest in golf and you just want to whack a few balls down a drive range. But they make it kind of fun, and it's like a nice environment, and food and drinks and a nice social place. And I happen to live right next to one, so which is lovely. So I have done that. But and also I lived in a place called Milton Keynes in the UK for a while, and the reason why that's connected to golf is because there is a course in Woburn in the UK, which is a proper PGA standard. There's lots of events that happen there, and a resident pro there and all that as well. And I have been to that a couple of times. I won't pretend to be any good, but I've gone to that.
There's the reason we're on this side of the table here. That's it's a lot safer when you're using the technology and not actually putting the tee in the ground. But that being said, across the territory, then we run a tournament program and other USGA services as far as course rating. We're dabbling now in adaptive golf and a lot of these other programs for juniors and things to cover all things amateur golf. So while the PGA of America kind of handles the professional side, we're handling all things amateur golf for all ages, men and women. So that brings us around 200 event days per year. The majority of those are going to have some volunteer requirements. Some of them are just staff, but the majority we have at least a handful of folks. Our biggest volunteer events is probably our adaptive championship, which we are now in year 3. I might be off 1, 2. I think this is the 3rd year, but anyway, that one we usually end up with about 100 volunteers, and being able to bring in folks, from within our regular volunteer community and then from the host club or kind of outside of our normal sphere. Rosterfy has made that so much easier and just so much simpler.
How has that happened?
That has been, I think it's a combination of just a consistent first impression, when they're seeing the website, getting the same form, getting that same email workflow that we, obviously have total control then over our messaging, font colors and all those sorts of things. So being able to speed that process up in today's world so that there is that instant gratification of, filling out an interest form and then automatically getting a reply back versus waiting for staff to, look at a spreadsheet to see new entries or just getting to it whenever they have a chance. So really kind of streamlining that and giving us better control over our first impression to make it more of a standardized message.
It's really interesting you say that, actually, because I was jotting down a couple of notes of like, what do I think is important right now in the sort of sporting sector specifically for volunteers? And my very top note was a consistent brand look and feel throughout the experience. That was the first bullet point I wrote down, and that was the first thing you said there. So is that I find that really fascinating. I find that really, really important, that how I view it is that the volunteer will feel like they're part of this grand, and it is a grand organization, that the volunteering side of it isn't a sort of offshoot and something that just happens and is ran by another team, that they are part of the heritage. That's the word I was looking for, the heritage of the sporting association, whether it be tennis, golf, or whatever it is. Am I onto something there? Is that something that
yeah, we obviously we take a lot of pride in our work, but then by, if we give you a logo shirt and you're wearing the brand, the hat, all the things, we want you to share in that same, pride, enthusiasm, loyalty, respect for what we're doing. Obviously Gap was founded in 1897, so 100 and however many years of golf in this area. So certainly want people to understand, how far we've come and like where we are now as far as the golf community. And we're fortunate to have some very, very historic courses in our region. So the chance for them to be involved and watch these players that'll, potentially be on tour, playing in college someday for the younger kids is something they really enjoy. So really bringing it into a central hub to put all of that in front of them to keep that enthusiasm and kind of harness that interest when they first, Googled us or came to the website in the first place.
For a country that's celebrating its 250 year, to have an association that is over 180 years old, it's pretty good going.
Yes. Like we are the oldest of the regional associations in the country. So no matter what Metropolitan Golf Association tells you, we are a couple months older. So yeah, I think a lot of that kind of thinking internally, obviously we're still a nonprofit, so we have about 32 staff members at this point, but certainly don't want to, spend time or resources duplicating efforts or doing things, emails and PDFs and things that could be automated, that can be put into workflows to use, the intelligence of technology wisely so that we can get back to doing other things, or let the volunteers kind of control their own destiny, if that makes sense, as far as how fast they want on board or not.
Yeah, it's kind of like making it self-serve, really, for lack of a better word, isn't it? Like, you standardize everything, and and that is really important for an association like yourselves, and making sure that the look, the feel, the brand, and the consistency is there. But once you've set that up, that's something you can automate and run with, so you can concentrate on providing a really good experience to your guests and making sure that your partners, your strategic partners and corporate partners, are getting the best possible bang for their buck, really, out of you as a team. Would that be fair?
Yep, totally fair. And just, obviously if you emailed me on Monday and I'm in the middle of a rainstorm, I'm not going to be in the best mood. So having that templated message that does convey the right emotion, or, me picking up the phone to be like, oh, Martin, I cannot talk right now, but would love to have you as a volunteer. But so just being able to take those things and just give everybody that same introduction on our best foot is good.
On that note, a little sidebar here. I'm actually in the process of writing some stuff around different sector. I'm looking at the healthcare sector, and I was concerned with automation getting in the way of the human interaction. So if you are automating, I know we're going a little bit random here.
Sure.
You brought this up, so I'm just going to keep going this thread. If you are automating so many of these messages, how important is it for you to still have boots on the ground and the faces and the ambassadors of your program really doing it. I'm just asking, like, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but it's because it's front of mind, because it's something I'm thinking about at the moment. Like, how do you think
No,
about
I think particularly for us, I don't have the exact average, but knowing that our community is largely seniors and older folks that really do tend to just want to pick up the phone and call someone instead of receiving an email or talking to a little chat bot or things like that. We do have that balance where we still do in-person trainings. We still have like volunteer gear checks where they can like come and just pick up their polo shirt and their hat in person and kind of put faces to names. So we're kind of towing the line on some of that, where we do, rules chats on Zoom in the off season so they can all still get together online. At least you're talking to people, but you're still sitting in your jammies at home, which is nice. So
and you
that
can coordinate that through Rosterfy, I suppose, couldn't you? Through the email communications. I mean, obviously not broadcasting the webinar, but I mean, anybody can do that over a number of different systems. But you're leveraging the technology there to still do a human thing too, rather than living in spreadsheets and having to write emails.
Yes. And obviously, putting a banner with that has, rules chat with a little whiteboard or, whatnot, it gives it a little bit more personality. So obviously there's still that component of, okay, we need them to sign up and then they attend, they get their points, and it's, all of that is kind of gamified as well. But then putting it in the training section so that they can watch the video later, or coming up with a multiple choice quiz where they can test and see if they did actually learn anything while they were listening is kind of fun then for them to be able to interact in a way that's not direct human to human, but still gives them that feeling that they're engaging in the same questions. And then, they can talk to their buddy at the club the next day about like, oh, well, how many penalty strokes did you say that was? I got that one wrong.
Do you do the, because Rosterfy has a learning management system module within it. Do you do any training via the platform, or is that dealt with somewhere else?
That's something we're looking toward in the future. So still trying to kind of find that balance of that in-person training component, because we're fortunate to have some very strong rules officials in our community that we really engage for those in-person presentations. And then the USGA has some testing programs that we rely on there for scoring and kind of rankings of folks. But we're looking into that kind of as a future goal, knowing that this is now year 3 for us in Rosterfy. So I would say we've kind of established like a new status quo as far as comfort level and everybody's use of the shift calendar and getting points and withdrawing from shifts and that sort of thing. So now we can start to level set on what our next kind of set of ideas might be.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you know what the size of your community was before you took Rosterfy? Like, what was
We were, I think, just over 300 volunteers.
Okay.
Total.
Do you know what you are today?
Now we are active over 450.
Wonderful.
With another, and there's another kind of side group of that is folks that we only use for our adaptive programming. So I kind of leave them in their own bucket.
What is the adaptive programming?
We run a championship in October and then a series of clinics and play days throughout the season. So folks that maybe, maybe you had a stroke or maybe you're coming back from a surgery or just trying to figure out how golf can work. We've got solo riders and some of the other equipment as far as limb impairments and things that people could try out to see if it makes sense before they consider, insurance or other purchases to try to make golf part of their life again.
That's wonderful. That's I thought that's what it was. I needed to double check, but that's lovely. That's a really good thing. 300 to 450, that's lovely. That's growing the community. How important is it for you to have golf seen as something that maybe young people might want to get involved in? And what roles do the volunteer program play in making that happen too?
I think that has been one of the bigger shifts. So with Rosterfy, we were able to switch to year-round recruiting, which has brought us a slightly younger crowd, because in previous iterations, we would only recruit like first quarter of the year and then kind of shut things down in April. So then if you were to, fill out the form, you would get a reply that says, oh, thanks for your interest. we'll talk to you in December. So now you've got this 7-month delay. And for younger folks, they're like, that's great. I'll, try Habitat for Humanity or, literally any other volunteer program at that point. So being able to recruit year round, we're not necessarily trying to grow that much bigger than we are right now, but we just want quality folks. And obviously there's a certain level of nerdiness that comes with being a rules official and doing some of these other tasks. So it's perfectly fine if somebody goes through and kind of watches the onboarding and stuff and says, you know what, maybe I'm not here yet. And that's okay. So being able to help them find that information and make that decision is, I think, also part of our responsibility in trying to recruit good quality folks too.
Do you know, so just going back to the automation side of things, do you know roughly how much time you've saved? It's a tricky question because unless you are measuring it beforehand, it's very hard to judge. But do you have a bit of a handle on maybe how much time you were spending on the boring stuff before compared to automating?
Without any specific true stats in front of me, I would say we've cut at least 50%, possibly closer to 75% of just admin time of retyping names or moving information for background checks or scheduling or PDFs that had to be saved and edited and resaved and all of that. So it's significant in short.
That 75 that you just said there, that happens to be the kind of benchmark that we see with a lot of organizations. But it's interesting you said 75 because that is almost exactly what we get back from most of our customers too, which is, I always find that, I just find it staggering when I hear it. It makes you kind of think, if you rolled the clock back 4 or 5 years, what on earth was I doing? My time was absorbed, drained, and just decimated by this admin. And it must feel very liberating to not live in that anymore and be able to concentrate on the program and actually do things that you want to enjoy. A line that I always use at Rosterfy is, no one joins a charity or a sports association to fill out a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
That's not what you do the job for. And there's certainly not why you'd stay as well. I mean, we know that brain drain from a sector and retention of highly experienced and talented people like yourself, the worst that could happen would be for you to feel empathy towards the role and want to move on, but just because of admin. That's tragic, really.
Well, and you don't want to get caught in errors that are related to, a human forgetting to press send on a reminder or typing somebody's email address incorrectly. So being able to limit those kind of self-induced errors by having to move data around in ways that were not efficient. So it's even if we didn't hit the 75% mark, the potential for error is so much lower between what we were doing internally, manually, is fantastic. So knowing that everything is being done and things are moving in the right direction correctly is kind of even more peace of mind than the time savings on that side as well.
What are the just thinking, zooming out a little bit, and if you can, talking broadly, what you think would be the challenges for the sector, not just for Golf Association of Philadelphia, but what are the day-to-day pain points that you think people in your position feel at a sports event or an association? And I know you can't speak on, I don't know your background, so I don't know if you've done many other sports, but it's I'm just curious what you think that actually is day to day.
I think it's probably the feeling of having so many balls in the air at the same time. So knowing that you've got events closing for registration on one side, you've got events about to open, you've got volunteers that are coming in, there's just questions coming from all sides. So I think it's an industry where the volunteer manager role, that person might be wearing 6 or 7 other hats too, depending on if the phone's ringing or if they're talking to somebody on site. So I think a lot of times that volunteerism falls to a back burner. Or similarly, having worked for a smaller association, I was always hesitant to try to open the gates on volunteering, knowing how big of a commitment it is as far as, managing those expectations and trainings and buying gear and buying lunches and all that. So it's kind of a slippery slope. If you recruit too hard, now all of a sudden you've got 100 people staring you in the face asking what next.
Yeah. And you've opened Pandora's box at that point. You have an obligation to support them and grow this. You can't just sort of go, oh, just joking. We were just testing something out.
Yeah, we said we needed you, but not all of you. There's kind of that balance of really understanding where your true needs are and then just wanting to recruit for the sake of recruiting. So you certainly want to entice people to come and join the community, but then also make sure you have enough roles and can actually, the demand matches. That's kind of where we're at in the core Philly area. We really are pretty stacked on volunteers, but if you get up to kind of that York, Lancaster area, or over in New Jersey, Southern Delaware, Rosterfy allows us to kind of pinpoint those regions to try to recruit more specifically for folks in those territories. While we certainly aren't turning them away, we're just not necessarily as loud in this Philly city area.
And even if, so you said 450 is a great amount and that's good for you. If your goal isn't to necessarily grow that massively because you have what you need, what is the goal then? Is it to just develop this community to the point where it directly translates to a better experience for the players and for the people on the course, or what's the end goal of that?
The end goal there, we've got some that are kind of more elementary roles as far as just being a spotter or, using a tablet to enter scores for the folks that would want to then move into a rules official position, or some of those that take a little bit more education or just studying to attain those levels of certification. That's kind of the main goal now, is to ramp up and just improve the overall knowledge level and comfort level of the volunteers that we have, so that they feel confident in their ability to execute these different roles or move up to do a USGA championship or college events with NCAA or things like that. So almost then it's professional development.
And the impact of that, what does that have on your customer?
Our players then would just be more confident that our volunteers are just overqualified almost, basically the same level that we expect our staff to be. So then they just have that confidence that they really are at a first class event, our major championships, that they've got the best of the best out in the field to support them and see them out running the event with us.
So I know that there are 54 golf associations linked to this particular group. You said there are loads and loads and loads, but the 54 that I was aware of are the Golf Association of Florida or what advice would you give someone in your position at any of the other 54 if they are sitting with, maybe they're using a HR piece of software that isn't quite fit for purpose, or they're drowning in PDFs and emails? Rewind the clock to when you decided enough was enough. You need to have a robust and trusted platform for that. What would your advice be to someone in that position?
I think the key for me was you have to be ready to look outside of golf. So our community is shoots itself in the foot a little bit because we have our IAGA group that's just all the golf associations talking to each other. So there really isn't a ton of room to grow or learn if you only ever talk to your immediate peers. So for me, it was trying to find, and honestly, the US doesn't have a ton of volunteer management groups specific to sports, as far as folks that are in a role, similar to mine or somebody that would be working with Rosterfy heavily. So, I volunteered at the Club World Cup for FIFA when they were in Philly last year. I didn't do the World Cup this year just for scheduling reasons, but being able to kind of take a wider look at exactly what we're doing, knowing that obviously there's some niche golf things, but really stepping back and saying, okay, if we're trying to run a volunteer program, it doesn't necessarily need to have a golf ball in its logo, or it's not going to be from Golf Genius or USGA Tech necessarily. So really trying to take a look at what the community of volunteer programs is doing in the country, knowing that that's kind of who our competitor is, whether it be a Ronald McDonald House or Habitat or local hospitals or any of these other groups, to see how they're presenting themselves in front of a potential volunteer, and then trying to match that with still keeping our tradition and kind of that old school golf feel. So I think that was the key, was trying to just remove myself from the golf community to take a wider look at what we were doing and what's going on in that sector.
And that's fantastic advice. And what was your main sort of takeaway from like the FIFA World Club Cup, for example? Because that is an example of a Rosterfy platform being used there. What was your takeaway from that?
It was a lot of fun to be on the other side. So obviously getting to run through, and it is gamified, and that is motivating to a person when they go through and they say, okay, well, I need to complete step 2, 3, 4. I can do this one right now, and then that one's not going to be released for a while. Now I can watch this video and I get the newsletters, and everything is so seamless. Obviously they pour a ton more money into it than we do, but being able to kind of just feel those emotions as somebody that's a little bit more unfamiliar. So I think in golf, and probably any organization, you get so stuck in what you're doing and kind of take for granted how much is actually unknown, or that you do need to explain, or kind of realize is new to somebody that's just stepped on your website for the first time.
With that, you just mentioned about FIFA obviously having more resources to do that stuff. I think one of the things that, although that is true, I think one of the things that I really, really like is our platform allows you to, it's kind of like scalable for anybody to do these things too. Like, I know it requires a bit of time, and I know that there's a level of polish that they can put into it when they've got like a brand team behind them, but they are pulling on the same levers that are available to you. You open that platform, it's there. It's just how much are you going to invest in gamifying that experience and what to do with that. But that's, so the reason why I loved your answer about what advice you would give, you would look beyond the golf sector, is because there are some great ideas from non-profits to other sports that anybody could pull in and use. And I do find it a bit of a shame, actually, that there isn't, in my experience now, having sort of focused on North America for the last sort of year or so, there doesn't seem to be a collective community of volunteers that are piling in ideas to each other. More so in sport, I think. There are pockets of this for the non-profit and philanthropic sort of sector, but not as much as, having come from somebody that lives in London and knows the UK non-profit scene very, very well. Nothing like that. Like over here, there are lots of associations that encourage the idea. So I would personally love to see more of that, particularly in sport.
Yeah, and I think we're a little self-conscious, going into some of these. You see a nonprofit meetup, blah blah blah, and then you go around the room and you're like, oh, this soup kitchen here, and then they're building houses there, and I'm like, I just ran a golf tournament at Marion. Like, there comes
everything has value. It meant something important to a lot of other people. Don't put it that way.
Yeah. So it sounds a little bizarre when we put ourselves in some of those other, nonprofit circles with folks that are, I'm not saying we aren't doing good, but obviously there's different levels of volunteerism depending on what you're trying to support. So
I'm going to wrap up by diving into a few specific little things around the platform and the features. Just, I don't know what you use day to day, but I'm going to kind of throw a little scenarios, and I just want to see what you use and if you're using that. One would be like, a scenario would be like a volunteer no-show. So what happens on Rosterfy for you for a volunteer no-show, and how does that sort of translate to the world that you lived before, what that might be?
So now we've got most of them, I would say 3 years in, the majority of them are going to reply to their text message reminder and tell us, hey, I can't make it, or I'm, having the ability to text with them versus relying on them to email or call. They can send a note super quickly or just a thumbs up, and that's great. So I think that has sped up the process of kind of meeting people where they are, as far as, just send a quick text and it's done, we're good. So we don't have a ton of no-shows because of that now. And the fact that I don't say we over communicate, but they get the email reminder, then they get a text message reminder a couple days later. If the weather's looking questionable, then even more so. So I think we've been able to get in front of that. And again, kind of keeping the field into this quality group of folks that really do kind of over communicate with us about their availability. So we don't have a huge no-show problem, which is, I'm happy to report.
Yeah, it's really good. What about credential checking? Do you have an onboarding process that requires them to fill out? I noticed when I was signing up to your volunteer program, I saw there was a good number of questions, actually, probably more than I was expecting, as in the form is quite long. So I've got 2 questions now, because you just hit on something that I'm obsessed with, which is like form attrition, like worry that you ask too much up front. And I've completely forgot the first question that I was going to ask. Credential checking. So yes, so yeah, before I forget what we're talking about, what
yeah, so we're partnered with Sterling, or whoever Sterling has been bought by, because that was something that was, it was important to us before. A lot of folks think it's because of our, obviously junior golf is one component of that, working with youth golfers. But then the other component of that is, if we're walking into these golf courses and their pro shops, we've identified a few folks with records of theft on their background check. And that's not something that we are necessarily going to tolerate, just based on the fact that we are going into some of these golf courses, very high-end places, where that's not somebody that we want wearing the logo or representing the association. So I like to remind our peers in the golf community that obviously, youth sports is one component of that, but then there are other things that folks may have had in their past history that we certainly want to be mindful of, and be able to kind of look in that full picture to make a decision before we bring them fully into the community. So that was one that we have been pretty strongly consistent with, even before Rosterfy, just knowing, where we're walking into and who we want to have with us.
And by having it in Rosterfy, you've got that peace of mind that from an audit point of view, you can see checks made, rather than hoping that someone did the paperwork, right?
Yes. We're getting back, before that was something I think they filled out like a woo-foo form, and then we had to take all of that and retype it into the background check software. So again, hoping that nobody was making any mistakes or typing a date of birth wrong. And then you're waiting for that to populate there, so then the staff member can send a message. So being able to just remove, that's a lot of the admin time we were talking about earlier, was just moving that information from one system to another, where now that just happens, seamlessly within a couple days, based on the workflows that we have set up for onboarding. So
that's good. Just again, a random side thing. Do you worry you've asked too many questions on the form, or do you do it by design? Because, well, I'm going to guess, one, you have a very engaged community that will probably just fill this out because they're just desperate to work with you guys, and 2, it's useful to know things like whether or not they want to be a tournament volunteer starter as opposed to whatever it is. So you are feeding that information up front in Rosterfy to then use later. Is that right?
Yep, that was our main goal. Specifically now that we've added adaptive and some of the course rating and some of these other kind of sidebars that actually do move to other staff beside me. So being able to see that up front, a lot of our folks are coming as referrals from other volunteers. So they do kind of enjoy bragging about themselves and their golf life on this form. But yes, obviously, if they check the box that says they've been to a rules workshop, or that they just volunteered, maybe they came through us, maybe they volunteered at the PGA Championship this year at Aronimink, and then they wanted to see what else they could do. So it gives us a little bit more of conversation piece to have, that first shift that they show up to, or knowing which volunteer we might pair them with for that first shift, so that they have some common ground with folks. So it's towing the line between too much. Not all of them are required questions, so they can certainly skip it if they want to. But we find that most people like to to give us a little background information on just how much golf they're playing or where.
Yeah. And I'm going to finish on 2 questions. So I've got one, it's a cheeky one, but I'm just going to ask it. And if you need a second to think about it, just let me know. One, why should somebody volunteer with Golf Association of Philadelphia?
Mm-hmm.
And 2, what has Rosterfy meant to you and your team in a kind of nutshell? Like, what's the we got this because of this, and this is how it makes me feel.
Mm-hmm. If it's okay with you, I'll tackle the second one first, and I'll keep thinking about the first one. So I think for us, a lot of the motivation, previously we were using an internally created database that was probably built like late 90s, maybe early 2000s. So it feels very much like Microsoft Access back in the day. So for us, this was, okay, if we're going to make a move, like we want to be future proofing this. We want it to be easily, for succession planning with staff, we want somebody to be able to pick it up if they come in. Knowing that the database components are going to be, compliant with data privacy laws and internet safety and those sorts of things for the sake of the volunteer. So there were just so many things internally that we were focused on, knowing that, yes, it is a big shift coming from a system that's been in use for 20-ish years. But really just that safety of knowing that we're picking a product that is well respected, is, doing the right things as far as data compliance and just the tech behind it, knowing that staff could pick it up pretty easily. And then that knowledge could be transferred to new folks or interns as they're coming in to learn. So I think internally there was just as many pros as there are on the volunteer side, that we liked, some of the things we talked about, first impression, branding, kind of that pride in the association that we can present. So that was really what we were looking for in evaluating different products 3 years ago now. So Rosterfy came up, the value of what we were paying versus what we could see and the potential of what we can grow into. It was a kind of a natural fit for us to pull the trigger. And then why should you volunteer? Well, if you're not going to play in the event, you might as well be in the environment, because there's so much empathy in it, I think, specifically for the volunteers. So if you're a player, or if you're somebody that's just watching on TV, being on the golf course, watching these players, be vulnerable and try to go out there and win, right? You can feel it. You can feel the emotion. Golf is a part of their life, whether them as a player, maybe a son or daughter. So just being within the community and seeing, who's doing what, getting to go to the courses, getting that outside exposure, getting a little bit of exercise. I think it just gives another kind of offshoot in golf to be able to say you're involved, even if you're not, going to be holding the trophy anytime soon.
I love it. Thank you. That's it, really. Thank you very much for answering those. I think I covered everything that I was hoping to get. And like I said before we kicked off the call, really, I just really appreciate you giving us the time and me the time to learn a little bit about Gap. And thank you very much.
Of course, yeah, happy to kind of share how it's gone. And obviously, I've talked with. I was on a task force for the USGA as far as kind of talking with some of the other golf association staff as folks are starting to retire some of these homemade systems and look at technology. So really, it was interesting to kind of see where everybody is at and how much time they're spending, and where they're at in their decision making. So
I would have loved to have been in that room. I think
it was a fun series of a lot of Zoom calls, but it was interesting to see where everybody was at across the country.
Do you think there's a real scale between like how much sort of sophisticated their platforms are, like ranging from you hire someone like yourself in that's maybe a bit more forward thinking and tech savvy compared to some that are quite happy to live in MS Access and Excel? Do you think that there is a push for the sector to standardize a little bit of this and look to
I think yes and no. So before I came to Gap, I worked for the Delaware State Golf Association, and obviously Delaware is a very small state. So for me, I had about 6 volunteers that were my core group of guys, and maybe I'd bring on one new guy. And, for us, the onboarding and some of these other conversations was, 6 of us around a table with like pizza and a beer, right? So there's some that to scale, the size of the association is always going to dictate the really just how many events they have and how many volunteers they need. But then at the same time with USGA and some of these other larger regional groups like us, yes, there's 100% a need to move into a more technologically savvy space that doesn't require constant manual updating.
Yeah, definitely. No, I appreciate it. There's probably only like maybe a dozen that are big enough to warrant
right.
that investment, but where it is needed, it is important. So yeah, great. Okay, Laura, I'll leave you for the rest of your day. I'm wrapping up my day here now. I will share with you the I'll do a little write-up for it, and I'll share that with you. And if there's anything that you want to red line or just say, oh, actually, I've got a number for that, I didn't think about it before, but I'll give it to you before I do anything with it. But
if you need any other data points, happy to seek out anything, or if you think of any other questions.
Yeah, there's probably, I normally drop a couple in that are like, if you have it to hand, it would be good to know this. But I think we covered quite a bit. I do know that there's a guy called Bill Walker who Bill is asking me to get involved in something in October or November, I think it is, like a conference where they're pulling a few together. I might have an opportunity to do a little talk for the associations about volunteer management software. So yeah, I may call on you closer to that time to at least be my a cheerleader for some of my stuff and maybe support me with some you know, back real world experience, not just marketing chap standing up and saying all this guff, but like you actually telling them what it actually means in the real world would be really wonderful. But I'll let you know how we go with that. I don't know yet really how that will play out, but we are very keen on meeting the other associations and seeing if there's much scope to talk about which tech should be used and what's to be trusted and all that. And we hope that we've done a good enough job with yourselves to warrant that referral, as it were.
Yep. No, I've been involved with Bill. That's the IAA conference. My first one was 2013, so I
right, you know all about it.
Know that community very well. Yes.
Well, fair enough. I'm a complete novice to this. I've had 2 conversations with Bill, and he's asked to do a meeting on Monday to talk about what we could potentially do in that conference. So does it feel like somewhere that would suit us as a platform to talk? Is that the right environment? Or
I think particularly, obviously, you want to promote Rosterfy in that space, but it's kind of the conversations we're having about automation and how are you talking to your volunteers. I think there could be kind of a balance between, okay, here's our product and here's why Rosterfy is awesome, and just kind of having that conversation about, how are you meeting volunteers as far as texts and AI and, all of these other things to make sure that golf is up to speed with everybody else.
I'm glad you said that, because although in this call I did mention that I'm thinking about the healthcare sector at the moment and like an over-reliance on automation and AI at the cost of human interaction, but I think now that I think about it a bit more, and after you've said that, I think you could pretty much pick any sector and say the same conversation. You're automating so much, don't lose sight of your community and their need to have access to you as a person and not just be workflow that triggers in the background. So the more I talk to people about this theme, the more I'm convinced there's something people aren't talking about enough here, and that could be an interesting topic of conversation. But by the end of the year, maybe it'll be old news and everyone would have covered it by then.
Right.
But anyway,
I think the group would definitely enjoy that in the mix of all the conversations that are had at that conference. That's definitely relevant.
Lovely. All right, Laura, thank you very much. I'll speak to you again soon. All right.
Sounds great.
Have a good week.
You too.
See ya. Bye.